Welcome to Untangled Minds, episode 11, I think. Welcome to Untangled Minds, making sense of the mess one thread at a time. Life with ADHD, autism, and other neurodivergent experiences can feel tangled, chaotic, and overwhelming. I'm Deanna, a therapist, writer, mom, and intuitive, and I know firsthand what it's like to hold both the struggle and the beauty of having one of these brains. In this podcast, we'll explore the intersections of neurodivergence, attachment, relationships, parenting, and healing. Through story, strategy, and soulful conversation, we'll untangle shame, celebrate strengths, and create space for authenticity. If you've ever felt too much, not enough, or simply different, this is your place to breathe, laugh, and just be here. Welcome back. As you can see, I'm in a new space. This is my she shed. I am so excited to be recording this episode today. In full transparency, I've been trying to record an episode all week. I think I've recorded 4 or 5 different episodes, or at least tried to record 4 or 5 different episodes, and I keep running into some struggles, and that's okay. Struggles are allowed. I guess that's probably part of being a podcast, right? Like not everything is going to flow as the way you want it to. Not everything is going to be as easy and straightforward as it always has been. This week I wanted to record an episode about masking and the impact that masking has on your mental health. And that, for me, proved to be a very, very difficult topic because every time I started to talk about masking and the impact that it had on my mental health, I had a spiral and I struggled to articulate the impacts of masking. So I don't know if I told you, I think I did, but I just recently started a new job. I am, aside from my time here as a podcast host, I also work as a supervisor in crisis emergency services. And I work with a voluntary team that focuses on connecting residents and clients within our community with emergency services and mental health and substance use services to avert crisis. And I started my new job a couple of weeks ago. And before I was doing this job, I was working in a psychiatric hospital as a therapist. And that became something that I was used to. It was routine. I knew what to do. I knew how my day was going to go, even though every day was a little bit different. It wasn't unpredictable. It was predictably unpredictable, I guess you could say. And I didn't feel like I had to mask a lot in that job anymore because I had become so adapted to the needs of that job and the people who were around me. And when I switched to my new job, naturally, as part of probably every autistic person's routine, when you're in an unfamiliar environment, when you're doing new things, I started to mask more than I had for a really long time. And because of that, I started to notice that I was a lot more tired. I was a lot more exhausted at the end of the day. I was struggling to do the other aspects of things in my life that I wanted to accomplish, including recording podcast episodes. I noticed that I started to avoid some tasks because the mental drain and the mental capacity of which I was operating under wasn't enough. As I was adjusting to really give me the ability to do all the things I needed to do. I was doing everything I needed. I was working, I was learning, I was doing all the things. I was prioritizing my private practice and my kids and my new job. And as I prioritized those things that didn't have any wiggle room, I started to notice that I was deprioritizing the things that were keeping me even keel. For example, my self-care. I was deprioritizing working out. I was struggling to go in the mornings to work out. I was deprioritizing feeding myself healthy meals. Um, During one of my weeks, I found that I didn't want to go to my personal therapy appointment. Um, and I fought that one. That one was hard. I found that I was relying heavier on the unhealthy coping skills that I still utilize because after all, I am human, so I use unhealthy coping skills sometimes. Um, and overall, I just noticed that I was struggling. And that's okay. Okay, sorry about that. So I got a phone call. I'll take care of that. So I think that it's really important to understand that masking can be necessary. I think everyone kind of masks to some degree. The idea of masking is the idea of putting on emotional camouflage to allow yourself to be more palatable or more likable to other people. It's like when you're using regulated tones. So I'm keeping myself even keel. I'm not being over the top or I'm not being too flat. It is mimicking behavior. So if somebody is sitting back like this, it's sitting back like this, just like them. Or it's like monitoring your facial expressions and mimicking facial expressions, hiding when you become overstimulated. I think for me, one of the things that I do so often is like when I'm masking, I'm often toning myself down to make myself less for people. I also will hide my overstimulation from them, my stimming behaviors. Um, it's this point where I will take who I am and make it more palatable to others. And this was something that was like trained into me when I was growing up. Like, you have to act this way. You have to do this. Do you see other people acting that way? Stop doing that. Um, and I don't think most people even realize that when you're masking, okay, rewind. I don't think most people realize when they're masking, and they don't realize they're masking until they burn out and shut down. And that is a key thing to know, because when you are autistic and you first receive your diagnosis, you often experience what we call skills regression, which is when your ability to maintain the mask that you've used for a majority of your life starts to become so heavy that you're unable to keep the facade going, and you are then put in a position of being unable to maintain the status quo. And that always leads to people saying things like, oh, you've changed. Yeah, I've changed. I'm no longer the person who is making myself that makes you comfortable. The thing about masking is this, that people will love the version of you that makes them the most comfortable. So when you stop being that version of you, you're going to potentially lose people. And I know that sounds scary as somebody who struggles with making and maintaining relationships, but the weight of carrying a mask is so significant that it's not worth the toll on your mental health. If you've never dove into the idea of unmasking, or if you've never really considered that you are a high masking individual, you might not even realize the toll that masking takes on your body. I would say this last 2 weeks, I've really tried to pay close attention to the things that my body has been experiencing. And what I've noticed is that my body has been more tense. I've been more dysregulated. I experienced a migraine for the first time in a good couple of months just 2 days ago. And when I started the prodromal period of that migraine, which for those of you that don't know, that's the onset of the migraine before you really get the pain that is associated with a migraine. So before the prodromal period, when the prodromal period started, um, I actually clocked that my dysregulation became more, my stimming behaviors became more. I was having trouble with words. So like I was really struggling to come up with the words that I wanted to use in meetings and when I was masking specifically. I also noticed that I was doing a lot more glitching. um, I refer to glitching as those moments when I am in the middle of a conversation and I'll be like, yeah, that's a glitch. Some of them are really bad. Sometimes I don't even know the words that come out or what they were supposed to be. They just happen. Um, But why is masking so bad, right? So we spent that whole like mini series talking about the fight or flight response and your body's triggered state in the fight or flight response and the sympathetic activation, right? So sympathetic activation is when your body is in an activated state in a fight or flight freeze mode, right? And then parasympathetic activation is when your body is starting to calm down. Well, when you're masking, you are in a mode of hypervigilance, which activates your sympathetic nervous system and sends you into a chronic or an extended period of fight or flight mode. And that means that your body is having impact to cortisol levels, which leads to like chronic fatigue or migraines, digestive issues, sleep issues, and ultimately can lead to an autistic shutdown, which is when you no longer have the ability to even function. Um, I have only experienced one or two shutdowns in my whole life. And those shutdowns for me happened after an extended period of masking and high emotions when I had to pretend I was okay. Um, and I kind of like look at it like this. Masking is like taking your bucket, your energy bucket, and poking a hole in the bottom of it, and then pretending like that hole isn't there. And while even though you might be pouring back into your bucket, the hole is bigger than what you're able to put back in. So as you're like standing there and masking, your bucket starts here and it starts to drain and it starts to drain. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to put more in, but it's still draining, right? And so it's like this pour, but it's still going down. And your body doesn't understand why, when I'm pouring so much into myself, am I still struggling, right? Why am I still in this activated state? And so it can lead to insomnia, it can lead to constipation or diarrhea. I don't know if you've ever noticed, if you ever get really, really nervous, do you ever have diarrhea? That is your body's fight or flight response and the hormones associated with it impacting your digestive system. Um, Most of you have probably heard about the book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's an absolutely fantastic book about how your body keeps the score associated with chronic trauma and how, while we may not even remember certain traumatic events or different things that have happened to us, our body does. Um, I don't want to spoil that book. I recommend every person in the world read it. It is an amazing book. But the theme continues when we are using masking and keeping our body in an activated state. Our body is keeping that tally. We are the one who is saying to our body, you have to be this, do this in order to be accepted or be liked or be whatever. And it comes to this point where if you are masking for too long, it it's damn near impossible to differentiate, where does therapist me, mom me, real me, where does one me start and the other me end? Where does who I what I do stop and who I am begin? And eventually when you are masking for so long and living in that world of like what I am, right? Therapist, mom, the roles I play, the masks I wear. When you spend so long in those roles, your body starts to not think, or your body and your brain start to believe that the authentic me, the one that I'm hiding from the world for fear of whatever retaliation that might be, that one that I am hiding, that authentic me is no longer safe, which means my body is teaching itself that who I am is too much, is over the top, is not lovable, is insert self deprecating comment here. And the longer I stay there, the more I believe that these automatic negative thoughts that I'm experiencing are true, which then leads me to more masking, because if I'm not lovable, if the authentic me is not somebody that people like, then I can't be that me. And so I have to mask more. And as your body continues to stay in this hypervigilant state of fight or flight mode in that sympathetic nervous system, then it becomes harder and harder for you to maintain that level of masking. And that is what leads to burnout. And what that looks like for many of us is increased stimming, increased anxiety, major depressive symptoms, all the way to like dissociation and shutdowns. So my mental health has struggled over the years, and I personally experience dissociation when my depression gets too bad and my body and my brain go into autopilot. And sure, that's not the best, but it gets me through, right? But the toll that it takes on my mental health is so significant that I can't even hold together the basic necessities of my life that keep me sane. So, as I was saying, like the toll that masking has on my mental, emotional, and physical health is obscene. And you would think that, like, somehow over the course of 35 years, I would have recognized the increase in the depression symptoms, the increase in the anxiety symptoms, the insomnia symptoms, the imposter syndrome, all the different things that, like, lead me down this path of struggle. Um, but you just don't. It's so difficult to pinpoint how the act of being what other people want me to be makes me miserable. So recently I was talking to my brother, and my brother and I got into a disagreement about my autism diagnosis. And then that led to a conversation about how I struggle with being around people and the different things. And he said something to me that I despise, but he said that I don't understand why this is so difficult for you because you've never struggled with this before in your life. So why now? And I didn't have it in me to try and explain to my brother, who was never going to see things the way I see them, how skill regression works, how masking works, how burnout works. I was not going to have it in me to teach him that. And so I just didn't. But what I realized was that if I wanted to make a difference in the world around me and the people who I supported and the people who trusted me and who I trusted, then I needed to be honest with myself and I needed to be honest with them. And what I told my brother, or tried to tell my brother, is that I played a part being exactly what everybody wanted me to be for my entire life because that was what was expected of me. And in turn, because of that, I was disassociated. I was depressed. I was anxious. I was not happy. And pretending to be something I wasn't was taking such a great, significant emotional toll on me that I was really not sure where I was going to go when I no longer held up that mask. But it turns out that when I stopped holding up the mask and started being myself, while I did lose people, while I lost supports and people that I thought that loved me, um, I found that I was just happier in general. Um, I found that when I allowed myself to stim, when I allowed myself to be authentic, I was less anxious. I was more proactive in taking care of myself. Um, Over the last couple of weeks, like I said, I've struggled with taking care of myself and my self-care. That meant getting out of routine with the gym and making excuses of why I didn't need to go, or eating unhealthy foods. Um, Maybe drinking a little bit more alcohol than I normally would drink, which normal is like none. Not taking my ADHD meds, which that was not my fault because I'm having insurance issues. Um, and I realized that nobody in my life was going to understand why being authentic was so important to me, because they couldn't see the mental and emotional impact that masking was having. That's a long and a lot of words for trying to tell you that, hey, once you get a diagnosis, skill regression happens and you probably are going to find it harder to mask. And when you start having trouble masking, you're going to start potentially losing people or friends in your corner. And you're going to feel like you're failing, and you're going to feel like you are no longer able to be the person that you've been for your whole life. And guess what? You're not. And that's okay. And it's important because masking and hyper fixation on being what makes everybody comfortable is literally going to just burn you out. You will cease to exist as an authentic individual, and you will become the mask that you put on that is miserable and over the top boring. So to prevent that from happening, what do you have to do? Right? Deanna, how do I not become that person? Well, you have to make a commitment and a standard practice of doing little things to take off the mask. For me, taking off the mask means allowing myself to stim. It means allowing myself to honor my diagnosis. It means honoring my brain and how it functions differently. It means acknowledging the overstimulation. It means giving myself space to breathe when I'm feeling overwhelmed. It also means recognizing when the masking is starting to take a toll on my body. My body tells on me long before I realize that the masking is having a toll. And that often is indicated by tension in my shoulders, anxiety, migraines, headaches, um, difficulties with sleeping, bowing out of my own self-care routines. Um, so instead, I practice little things to help myself unmask, sorry. I practice little things to help myself unmask. That might be being myself during these kinds of podcasts. It might mean singing at the top of my lungs. Pardon? It might mean journaling and saying what's on my mind with no filter. It might mean practicing breath work and letting my body activate the parasympathetic nervous system. It might mean increased awareness as to being who you want me to be versus who I am. But really, for me, the biggest piece of unmasking is just acceptance that I'm different, and that's okay. I don't expect myself to be everybody's cup of tea. I don't expect myself to be the end all be all of perfection. I don't expect myself to be the most attractive, put together person in the whole world. I expect myself to be authentic. I expect myself to live a genuine life. I expect myself to acknowledge when the tasks being asked of me are too much for my nervous system. And in turn, that means that sometimes I'm not going to be able to be what makes you comfortable. Sometimes I'm not going to be able to accomplish all the tasks I want to accomplish. Sometimes I'm going to have to accept that I'm not perfect. Sometimes I'm going to love too hard. Sometimes I'm going to run away. Sometimes I'm going to self-sabotage. Sometimes I'm going to be sporadic and I'm going to chase the dopamine. And sometimes I'm going to fall flat on my face because I didn't listen to all of the tells that were telling me that I needed to stop. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with trial and error. There's nothing wrong with being authentic. There's nothing wrong with masking, per se. But there is something wrong with betraying your body and burning yourself to the ground in an attempt to be something that you're not. So, what do I encourage you to do? I encourage you to practice small unmasking opportunities. So maybe that means allowing yourself to stim in other people's company or in your own company. Maybe that means allowing your brain to process in the way that your brain wants to process. Maybe that means being as big, bold, and beautiful as you are without making yourself less. Maybe that means journaling and self-affirmations to say that I am perfectly me, just how I am. Maybe that means saying this is too much for me. I can't do this. I want you to focus on your breath work and on activating the parasympathetic nervous system to allow your body to regulate and come out of the fight or flight response. But most importantly, of all the things I want you to do, is I want you to give yourself grace. Because you, much like me, are just a human being who is trying to figure out how to navigate a world that is not designed for brains like ours. We are trying to figure out how to live in a world that expects things from us that we are unable to give without sacrificing who we are. So I challenge you to accept that you are not perfect and that you will not be able to be everything that you want to be. And I challenge you to accept that that version of you who you sit there and judge every day because it's not what everybody else says you are, that version of you is perfect just as it is. And I challenge you to show that person to the rest of the world. I love that version of you. I love that version of me. I am over the top. My personality is huge. I am loud. I love hard. I don't give a fuck about boundaries most of the time. That's an understatement. I do care about boundaries. What I don't care is people putting me in a box. I am not small. I have a huge, giant personality and it does not belong in a box. It doesn't belong in a teacup. It belongs in a motherfucking gallon. And so do you. And I trust that you will trust yourself enough to know that that person, that you, that gallon is good enough. So, please, for the love of all things holy, go out into the world and shine your weird like a motherfucking lighthouse so the rest of us who are trying to navigate our way through the swampland of masking and the swampland of people wanting us to be things that we are not are able to find our center and come home. I will be that light for you if you'll be that light for me. With that being said, my friends, go out into the world and chase your weird. Shine it in all the darkest corners and find the people who are just like you because we exist. And until next time, stay weird.